in this video we're going to talk about simple interest. This is another one of those math skills that you will actually use in real life. And when you have me in 8th grade, we talk about compound interest, and you also use that one. But for this, we want to talk about simple interest. Simple interest is the amount paid or earned for the use of money. Examples, if you buy a house, you have to borrow money. You're going to pay interest back on that. Or if you get a savings account and you keep money at the bank, you earn interest on it. So interest is a real life thing. We all deal with it. You may even have an older brother or sister who, if you borrow money from them, they say, oh, okay, but you have to pay me back with interest. This is what they're talking about. So interest is a formula. And the formula is that interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. And we simplify that by saying I equals PRT. P, or principal, is the amount borrowed or invested. It could be as much as millions of dollars or as little as $1. Rate is the interest rate you will be dealing with. It's going to be written as a decimal. It's going to be a percent when you get it. We're going to have to convert it every time. Time is the amount of time the money is borrowed or invested. It's got to be in years. You're going to have to convert it if it's not in years by dividing by 12. And when I say convert it, maybe it's in months. Maybe you are borrowing $10 for 6 months. So we'd have to convert that by dividing by 12 into 0.5 because 6 months is half a year. Or maybe it's 2.5 years, so that'd be 2.5. So you're dealing with P times R times T. Or remember, we could always transform that equation, but for today's purposes, we're going to deal with P, R, and T. So let's look at some examples of some interest problems. Alright, so Brandon has $1,500 to invest. So this is a good example of interest because you want to invest money, not borrow it. The bank pays 4% in interest. If he invests for 3 years, how much will he earn? So remember, our formula is I equals PRT. So the principal is $1,500. So I equals $1,500 because remember the P stands for how much you put in. The rate is 4%, but remember we change it to a decimal, so 4% is the same as 0.04. And time, it has to be in years. Well, this is, it's in 3 years, so times 3. So to find out how much interest he earns, because in this case he's earning interest, we would do 1,500 times 0.04 times 3. We learned that Brandon's going to earn $180. So he's going to put in 1,500, he's going to earn 180. So after those 3 years, Brandon doesn't just have $1,500. He has 1,500 plus 180. Whoops. So Brandon, at the end of those 3 years, actually has 1,680. So he never added any money to that account, but he now has more money because of the interest. Okay, so what if he invested for 30 months, which is less than that? So 30 months, we would have to divide 30 by 12. So 30 months, this is when we would have to do the conversion. So we would do 30 divided by 12. 30 divided by 12 gives you 2.5 years. So now we would redo our equation and we would do 1,500 still times 0.04 because our interest rate didn't change. But instead of 3, we would do 2.5. And this time, Brandon's only earning $150 in interest. He earned less interest because it was invested for less time. That should make sense. Less time of investment, less interest earned. Okay, so let's look at another example. This time, we're borrowing money. She's borrowing a greater amount at a higher interest rate. What do you think is going to happen? So again, our formula is still I equals PRT. So our P is 2,000. Our interest rate is 9% or 0.09. But she's only borrowing it for a year. But we want to know how much interest does she have to pay back. So she's borrowing $2,000 times 9% times 1. So she's to pay back $180 in interest. So just make sure you have this straight. Laura doesn't only have to pay back the $2,000 she borrowed, she also has to pay back this $180 in interest. So she's going to pay back $2,100.80. So as you get older and you start borrowing money from banks, keep in mind you don't only pay back your loan, you also pay back the interest. So when you go to buy a house or rent a house or whatever you go to do, keep that in mind. So what if she rented it or borrowed this money and she's going to pay it back in 3 years? So if for 1 year it was 180, you can probably do this math in your head, but just for the sake of writing it out and dealing with the formula, we know that we would find our interest this way. So this time we would put in 2,000 times 0.09 times 3. If she borrows it for 3 years, her interest is $540. So now she not only has to pay back her $2,000, she's going to pay back her $540 in interest. That's $2,500. Yeah, $2,540 that she's paying back. I don't know what she borrowed that money for, but I hope it was good. And we'll talk a little more about interest tomorrow in class.